put the blame onto the Tories for the early release of nearly 2,000 prisoners. Let's talk about this now. 0207 862 2222. Downing Street has acknowledged it was incredibly difficult for victims to know that offenders were being released before their sentences were completed. They say the government had no choice because the Tories had not built enough prisons. They had 14 years to do it. They said they faced a situation in which the police would have been unable to make arrests, so they had to act. So, today, around 1,700 prisoners have walked free. Some have served only 40% of their custodial term. Is Keir Starmer right to blame the Conservatives for this? Mike?
Well, the prison system over the last 20 years has been hopeless because far from building new jails, we've been closing jails. I think we've closed 7 jails in the last 10 years. So I would say go and have a look and see if you can reopen some of those jails. I don't quite understand this policy because originally a junior minister said if we don't let prisoners out of jail, there's going to be riots on the streets. And nobody could understand what he was talking about. And then it was explained, well, the potential rioters need to be locked up. We're not sure what they're going to be rioting about. Now, the problems with letting people out under the rules that they've given are, for instance, they say, oh, don't worry, no violent criminals will be released. Nobody who's involved in domestics will be released.
Or stalking, which is another...
Or stalking.
Yeah.
But what that doesn't take into account of is that half the prisoners in this country have committed 10 previous crimes. So somebody could be released today who might be in there for ignoring their bail conditions, but previously were convicted of domestic abuse or previously convicted of a sex offence. That has not been taken into consideration.
Well, what do you think? Maybe in the end these guys are all coming out. They are mainly guys. You might as well release them now.
It is a sensationalised story because, you know, what was quoted there was people are going to come out having served 40% of their sentence. Custodial sentences, you only normally serve 50% of those in jail anyway, so it's going from 50 to 40.
Yeah, but hang on a minute, not everyone agrees with that. I mean,
exactly.
So what I would say
I thought life meant life until...
Yeah.
What I would say is this. I do think that it's fair to place some blame on the Tories because clearly this issue did not appear overnight. But I disagree with the reasons that Keir Starmer is giving for why the Tories should be blamed. I don't think the problem is that the Tories didn't build enough prisons. The problem is that the Tories exacerbated the root causes of crime. We know from the research, and people don't like to hear it because there's an emotional attachment to this, but when you look at the evidence, the link between poverty, inequality, and lack of mental health support and increased crime is unequivocal. It's almost unanimous in the research. And so if we want to actually talk about... Because the question is, do you want to just have more prisons or do you want to actually reduce crime? Because if you want to actually reduce crime, the answer is not to just arrest more people and build more prisons. The answer is to actually look at the root causes of crime and to tackle those. And
you make it sound so simple, but every government tries... you've got to grow the economy. The economy was flat on its back 15 years ago.
Well, let me give you an example.
Go on.
Glasgow in 2004
this is knife crime now.
had the highest rate of knife crimes per capita. It was the murder capital of Europe. 10 years later, that number was halved, and in 2017, none of the young people who were killed by in a knife crime incident were in Scotland. The reason is because in 2004, the Scottish government made a decision to treat knife crime not as a criminal issue, but as a public health issue. They invested into youth centres. They invested into training programmes. They gave people something to lose. And that is actually what led to a fall in knife crime.
Glasgow's now the drug capital of Europe.
You say that it's complex, but actually... the policy evidence is fairly obvious. You know, the countries that
spend
have...
a load of money. Look, if you buy everyone a TV, no one's going to steal televisions.
Countries that have high levels of inequality often have the largest prison populations.
Yeah.
And so, actually, it's more that governments are often very hesitant to push forward these policies because they go against the kind of knee-jerk reaction and the emotional attachment that we have to prisons.
Let's just get a call. I'll come back to you. Terry's in Dorset. Terry, what do you think of this? All these prisoners coming out in a day.
Hi, Jeremy. Nice to speak to you again, and nice to see Mike on the panel. Everything he says I agree with. But no one's questioned all the foreign prisoners that are in their jails. Now, your researcher said to me there's only about 10,000 prisoners in our jails. Why don't we release them to send them back to the countries after their sentence, or the 40% of their sentences, send them back to the countries that they came from, and that would release. We wouldn't have to send so many English or other people from the jails. Send them back to the countries where they belong.
Yeah, because I suppose if someone is, let's say, a Tunisian bank robber, and you send them back to Tunisia, you're relying on Tunisia to lock them up in their jail, and they may not feel like it.
Well, a lot of these prisoners, Jeremy, that are in these jails, at the end of the sentence, they're sent back anyway.
Yes, that's true.
That's
so you
true.
say release. That's an interesting one, Terry.
Terry's
Release all
absolutely right.
foreign prisoners.
Well, Terry's got it absolutely right. Over the last 3 years, we have sent back 4,000 foreign criminals, OK? So the Tory government have done that and freed up spaces in jail. I don't know why we can't send the rest back. I totally agree with you, but the problem is...
They don't get punished on the other side.
No, there's another issue here. The other issue here is we've seen it happen increasingly over the past couple of years. When we're trying to deport foreign criminals, people on aeroplanes suddenly take it upon themselves to say this is unjust and the plane's not taking off with this chap on it, who then goes on to commit a crime. You know, it's a social issue.
So Terry, because it's odd, isn't it, that if you say release foreign criminals, not, as you call them, English criminals, it sounds like you're giving favoured status to lawbreakers from other countries.
No. Perhaps I said that wrong, Jeremy. What I'm saying is, all these prisoners in the jail now, the foreign prisoners, at the end of their sentences, they have to go back to the countries they've come from. Why not send them back now?
Got it. All right, Dalia, what do you think?
It's interesting how send them back to where they came from is the solution to everything. I think that we are so attached to this idea that you can just punish your way out of violent crime or out of crime, when that is just not the reality that is backed up by the evidence. In countries where you have reduced inequality, in countries where you give people something to lose, that is where you have smaller prison populations, smaller conviction rates, smaller incidences of crime. All I'm hearing here is just an emotional desire to see more people locked up, rather than a desire to actually
to get
reduce
less
crime.
people locked up, because what we're talking about with foreign criminals, not people who've come here seeking British nationality. They've come here, committed crimes here, for instance, organised crime and that sort of thing, and they should be sent back to the countries they came from. That seems to be a simple solution.
One of the first scandals that Blair dealt with was the release of foreign criminals into the UK, and they lost track of them.
Absolutely.
I remember that 20 years ago. OK, thank you, Terry. After the break, more of your calls on this. Is Keir Starmer right to blame the Conservatives for the early release of prisoners? Because the Conservatives presided over full prisons. 0207 862 2222. Or do you say, no, Starmer's the Prime Minister, the ball is in his court? See you shortly. Now, your calls on the early release of 1,700 prisoners. Do you feel safe with these prisoners being released? Some prison service and probation workers have said they're deeply worried. Are you? 0207 862 2222. They've served probably 40% of their sentences, and we're told they're not violent. Tony in West Yorkshire, hi.
Hello there.
What do you make of this?
Well, it's obviously can't expect Keir Starmer to build a couple of prisons before he gets into power, so it was on the Conservatives to have some sufficient housing for prisoners. But just before the election, I recall reading about women's prisons, and one was half empty and one of them was 3/4 full. Another one in the north of England was only about 1/3 full.
Yes.
Well, why can't we move some prisoners around and have an empty prison for men again?
So you would put the men into the women's prisons?
Of course not. No, I'd take the women in the smaller, in the one that's got half full, into the other one that needs filling up, and that'd be leave an empty prison, wouldn't it?
If you put that, do you get that, Mike? You put the small ones in the big ones?
Well, look, I think we should let more women out anyway. In my mind, women are not as dangerous to society as men are, OK? So I'd look at emptying those. And then I've got a women's prison near me in Stockbroker Belt, Surrey, believe it or not. And you could empty a woman's prison and fill it full of men by releasing more women prisoners.
Right.
All these prisoners are coming out, by the way. There's going to be a crime wave because the probation service will not be able to cope with 1,700 convicts being released onto the
I don't
streets.
know if there'll be a crime wave, because, I mean, hopefully there aren't any violent people in here, I hope. I'm told there are no stalkers, which is a relief to a lot of people.
I think it's really interesting that, ultimately the reason that people are feeling nervous and uncomfortable with the ideas of prisoners being released early is because deep down we know that prison doesn't work. We know that it actually doesn't make you less likely to reoffend. We know that it doesn't make you... we know that it doesn't actually act
What's
as
the
an effective
alternative?
Well, it does
deterrent.
while you're inside.
We know that while
And
you're
if
inside,
you're
but
a victim of crime, believe me, you want to see your...
unless you're going to lock everyone who has committed a crime up for life, or you're going to go down the death penalty path, which I'm glad we don't have, then at some point every prisoner is going to be released.
Sure.
And I think deep down we know that what happens to those people in prison, more often than not, does not make them better off when they leave, does not make them less likely to reoffend when they leave.
That may be, but having been involved in a case where somebody got 5.5 years, and there are a number of victims in the case, of whom I was one, I can tell you that we all felt great relief.
Yeah. And
see
not only
him
that,
jailed.
I'm sure...
Not only that, prison works. We know prison works because when the rioters started getting banged up, the riots stopped.
That's true.
The government did a very good job.
In a day.
They get them into court, jail them, and what happens? No more riots.
Dalia's point is when they
issue-
come out of jail, the rioters are harder and faster.
exactly.
The problem is now, it's not... your policy would take 3 or 4 years to develop. Tough on crime, tough on causes of crime, all very good, and I commend it, but we haven't got time for that. We've got to get these people into prison.
Dalia's
You
policy
can
is to
walk and chew
change
gum at the
society.
same time,
Well, I see
right?
that. I do see that. The trouble is that all governments are trying to get us to grow and have more jobs. They're all trying to do it the whole time. It's very hard.
Yeah.
Lucy's in Essex. Lucy, what do you think? We've got all these criminals now just going to be roaming.
I suppose so, yeah. But I just think the system is wrong because if nobody's checking the books before the election, we've all voted under false pretences because they couldn't possibly stick to their plan if they haven't seen the books. So the whole vote is out, isn't it?
What, you mean Labour are starting to do stuff they hadn't told us they were doing? Actually, I think with this, they did kind of telegraph this because we all know, and this was the Tories were going to have to do this, that we've run out of prison places to the point where there have been court cases where a judge has said, I can't jail you because there's no beds. It's like the NHS in a way.
Yeah, I mean, if who's auditing the biggest purse in the country then? Because every other company gets audited.
Well, the answer is I suppose
responsibility, yeah.
I mean, maybe the PPE issues would have been picked up sooner if the other side were allowed to look at the books. I mean, surely they should be allowed during their term, the other side, to look at the books.
That's a good point, Lucy. Thank you. Howard in Northamptonshire, hi.
Hello there, Jeremy.
What do you think?
Well, in answer to the binary question of is Starmer right to blame the Tories, I would say no, because I think there are so many complex issues at play here. And in terms of the number of people in prison, particularly men, I think the proportion is so high. And I think what the general public don't understand, or perhaps don't want to understand, sadly, is that the vast majority of men and women in prison are incredibly complex and traumatized people. At least 2/3 of men in prison are receive or have a diagnosis of at least 2 mental disorders. And
you've worked in the prison system, Howard, have you?
I have worked in the prison system as well as in the medium and high security hospital estate, including Broadmoor Hospital.
OK, which is where... Oh, I was trying to think who we've got in Broadmoor at the moment. Because
Peter Sutcliffe was in there.
Sutcliffe is dead now.
Yeah,
but
of course.
He was in there.
Yeah.
I think Huntley was in there for a while.
Yeah. Howard, can I just ask you, Howard, sorry, because you're in the penal system, a lot of these people who are coming out have got nowhere to go, have they? A lot of them...
Let Howard answer. Got 10 seconds, Howard.
Yes, they haven't got anywhere to go, which is why they need a multi-agency approach to tackle these issues. They need social services, they need the education system, they need CAMS, they need money injected into the services so that these issues can be identified at an earlier stage of a child's journey before they end up in a place like a prison.
Thank you very much indeed, Howard. Sorry to rush you. We just got that 10 o'clock break. Is always a bit of a hard junction for us. We'll take more of your calls on this after the break, though. 0207 862 2222. How are you feeling about the number of prisoners being released early today? And YouTube as well. YouTube, just go type Jeremy Vine on fire. This is actually Caravaggio, who died at 38. He was in a fight. Do you know what? He would have been one of the prisoners. He would have been in jail. He killed a guy in a fight. He died of a fever when he was on the run. And he was the greatest genius the world has ever seen. So let's not forget, some of these people being released from jail may have amazing things in their future that they can now work towards.
I would say it was very unlikely.
Why would you say that? Why wouldn't we have a Shakespeare in there?
Well, because we've already discussed the fact that the quality of person coming out of jail is usually that they've had a raw deal in life and they come from, you know, what you might call the lower end of society, and they've got problems that they've got to sort out. And letting them out when probation officers are overwhelmed, and the last caller told us they've got nowhere to go to live, is, to me, going to cause nightmare problems.
Let's see. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has been answering questions this morning about the early release of potentially violent criminals.
We inherited a prison system on the point of collapse. This is not a change that we wanted to make. It was the only option left on the table because the alternative would have seen the total collapse of the criminal justice system in this country. We would have seen the breakdown of law and order because courts would not have been able to conduct trials and the police would not have been able to make arrests. And that's not something that I was prepared to sit back and allow to happen. So this is a difficult decision, and I understand that people will be concerned, but we've tried to implement this change in a way that maximises public protection. So there are robust exclusions to this policy, and that includes all sexual offences are excluded from the changes that we are making, as are all offences of serious violence, terror offences, and some offences connected to domestic abuse. So we've taken every measure available to us.
OK, that was the Justice Secretary. Are you convinced, Catherine, in Essex?
If I'm honest, not particularly. I was a prison officer who was working in the female estate when the Tories closed down prisons, when we had a dip in prison population. I'm now a probation officer. And yes, they've released people into community to be supervised, but they're not discussing the people we've had to let go early from supervision. And whilst they might not be releasing those categories of violent offenders, sex offenders, we are releasing people early on supervision who are those category of offenders. So those people that should be supervised longer in the community have had to move on earlier to make space for the new people coming out.
Gotcha. So you've got people who've already been released early who will have been done for violent or sexual crimes, and they now can't be supervised because of this influx of new releases.
What's happened is, and I've even given a false name because a lot of us have wanted to speak up, but it's been very difficult because there's people that we've said should be supervised longer, but we've been told we have to let them go of our numbers to make space for these new people. And so there's certainly people let go early that we feel cautious about.
The prison you worked in, you said it was a woman's prison and it was shut down. Why couldn't they just keep it open and move men in there?
The prison population dipped temporarily at the time when it was closed down. But the ironic thing was there was a private prison being built very, very close to our female estate establishment, but the building stopped. They stopped finishing it, and now I don't know what even happened to that site. So not only did we lose, I think it was 4 or 5 prisons at that time, we also then really lost a project which was local to us for building more spaces, which now we all knew at the time that it was a short-sighted move. So whilst it's easy to blame the Tories for those decisions, I think Starmer's really what he's doing now is might win in temporary favour, but it's causing community issues and it will cause community problems.
OK, thank you very much, Catherine. Very interesting indeed. Catherine, not her real name. Jane in London, hello.
Hello, Jeremy, and might I first say, you look lovely. I'm agreeing with Mike this morning, and you have my lovely Dalia on from Novara Media, so what a wonderful debate.
But everyone's agreeing with Mike, so from Dalia's point of view, it's tricky.
Well, I'm calling in as someone who is a nurse for 31 years, but also when Holloway prison shut down, and by the way, bless Catherine and Howard for what they're doing. I used to work with disabled youth, and we used to go to Holloway, and some of the prisoners who are trustees were able to help us get our disabled children into the pool back then. I think they're privatised flats now. So, yes, this is an ongoing problem.
Well, are you worried what the releases will do, or do you think these people will start going straight?
Well, I'm with Dalia on the rehabilitation and Howard, absolutely. But at the same time, the prison service, clearly, those officers, I saw a documentary with an officer who had both their wrists broken, just trying to separate a fight. And the prisoners standing up for the prison officers, you know, and they need 8 weeks usually, at least, to get support services in place.
Yeah. Okay, Jane.
So,
Thank you so much. Terry in Kent, hi.
Hi, yeah, I don't think this plan's going to work. You know, and they're saying on the news that a majority of the people they're setting free are going to have nowhere to live and no response, no help regarding getting back to normal life. And the other thing is, if they're emptying the cells out, are they going to fill them up again, or are they going to keep them empty?
Well, they fill them up again, Terry. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? The courts have got to start working. The judges have got to be able to pass sentences. I would have thought they would fill them up within a few weeks.
Well, they might fill them up within days, to be honest. I'm sorry, Dalia. Do you know 2,000 prisoners recalled within a month of being released for reoffending? Where are the spaces for them?
Because prison doesn't make people less likely to reoffend. But what I think is interesting is here it says that actually everyone who is being released with a release plan that includes having somewhere to live once they leave prison and support to find work. Now, I don't know in reality whether that's going to happen. But, you know, I mean, we've got to take them at their word for now.
I don't take their word anymore.
Totally agree.
I'm afraid I don't believe it. Terry, thank you. Lisa in Essex, hi.
Hello.
A lot of calls from Essex today. Is this a particular concern there?
Yeah, it's a bit awful around Essex way. But my point, I do blame the Tories, but I do think Starmer should put the petty criminals. They should put them in the army. It might be an idea to, instead of releasing them on the streets, put them in the army and let them see their sentence out doing that.
Is it advisable to give hundreds of criminals guns?
Well, no, they'll be looked after, won't they? It's a very, very supportive system.
Yeah.
So they will be, and it's very strict as well.
Oh, you know, people say this a lot. I don't know, Dalia, what do you think of putting them in the army, or is that unfair on other people in the army?
I just think that we are picking every solution except the one that we know actually works, which is providing a rehabilitation pathway and investing in that. And again, stopping crime before it happens by reducing the root causes of crime. I understand that there's I know you've said that. It's 100 years. Yeah, exactly, no. In Glasgow, they halved their knife crime rates in 10 years.
Yeah,
so it's actually not. It's actually. But
what
we're doing.
I don't know what happened. I need to see this Glasgow thing. I'm starting to suspect it now.
What we're doing. I mean, it's one of the most famous cases in criminology.
Knife crime cases were radically high, and halving them was quite easy. I just don't know.
But they're radically high now, and we're struggling to reduce them because we're not doing the things that we know.
But it was expensive to do it, as well.
I mean, it's expensive, but it's also expensive to keep people in prison. It costs 60 grand per person to imprison them for a year.
If you say to people in an election campaign, "Will you pay more tax to build more prisons or to build or rehabilitation?" they'll just vote against you.
Yeah. They will vote against it, but then I don't know if they'll vote against. Maybe if you put it as an argument of, do you just want more prisons and more prisoners for the sake of having more prisons and more prisoners, even though in the long term it makes us a more unsafe society, or do you want to reduce crime? If you frame it as that, maybe we can start to have a real conversation.
Yeah, maybe so. Crime is actually falling in long term. Serious crime is falling. So
I'm not sure it is. It's just being overtaken by other things. Well, your Glasgow example, for instance, Glasgow is the drugs capital of Europe. So maybe the people who used to carry knives are now involved in the drugs trade or
Scotland
something.
is the drugs capital, yeah, for sure, yeah. I don't know how that's
Well,
happened.
we know that also drugs is a public health
You think people who were carrying knives have now moved to drugs?
I've no idea.
I mean,
OK. Charlie in Middlesbrough, hi.
Hi, hello.
What do you think, Charlie? Should we worry about these 1,700 early release prisoners?
Definitely. And good morning, and especially to Mike, because I agree with everything he says. But I've been told that there's 10,000 foreign prisoners in prisons throughout this country.
Yeah. Oh.
And someone once said to me, if they tell you the figure, double it or even treble it. Now, if we got rid of them first, and other countries have offered to take them and make them serve out the time in their countries, and if it's a serious crime, not to ever let them back in the UK.
Yep. Okay, well, so you get rid of, as you say, get rid of 10,000. You would probably, when you were deporting them, you'd get legal challenges, because we saw that with Rwanda.
Yep.
It's more difficult to deport someone than it is to just release them onto the street. So it might be held up. I don't know, Charlie.
But we got rid of 4,000 in the last 3 years.
Maybe that's where we're ending up here, is we've got to get rid of those 10,000 foreign criminals.
Yeah.
What do you think? You don't like that?
I mean, I just think...
Not a solution.
I think, again, like, we're just putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. And I know that it makes us all feel better to think about people who have done bad things having really bad things done to them, but it's an emotional response. It's not an evidence-based
But it's freeing up prison cells, isn't it? You know, if you
freeing up prison cells,
ship
but
people
ultimately,
back to
so
other
you're
countries, you're freeing up prison cells.
Okay, so and then what?
We're going to
We're going to get
put
back.
the criminals into the cells who are British criminals.
We're living in an increasingly... The root causes of crime are only getting worse. So all we're doing is prolonging and intensifying this cycle. And so, yes, we can talk about the nuances of what should happen over the next couple of days.
All right.
But unless we're talking about the bigger picture, we got it. It's just nonsense.
OK, thank you.